GDP can be determined by summing up national income and adjusting for depreciation, taxes, and subsidies. GDP can be determined in two ways, both of which in principle give the same result. GDP limits its focus to the value of goods or services in an actual geographic boundary of a country, where GNP is focused on the value of goods or services specifically attributable to citizens or nationality, regardless of where the production takes place. Over time, GDP has become the standard metric used in national income reporting, and most national income reporting and country comparisons are conducted using GDP. There are three methods of calculating GDP. Number one is product method or output method, second income method, and the third one is expenditure method. Output method. The output approach is also called net product or value added method. The method of measuring GDP is to add up all the final value of goods and services produced in the country, industry by industry. In other words, we focus on firms and add up all the productions. The output approaches focus on finding the total output of a nation by directly finding the total value of all goods and services a nation produces. Because of the complications of the multiple stages in the production of a good or services, only the final value of a good or services including the total output. This avoids an issue referred to as double counting, where the total value of a good is included several times in national output. By counting it repeatedly in several stages of production, for example, in meat production, the value of goods from the farm may be 10, then 30 from the butchers, and then 60 from the supermarket. The value that should be included in final national output should be 60, not the sum of all those numbers 90. Formula: GDP gross domestic product at market price is equal to value of output in an economy in the particular year minus intermediate consumptions of factor cost is equal to GDP at market price depreciation plus net factor income from abroad minus net indirect taxes. The sum of net value added in various economic activities is known as GDP at factor cost. GDP at factor cost plus indirect taxes less subsides on products is GDP at producer price. GDP at producer price theoretically should be equal to GDP calculated based on the expenditure approach. However, depreciations to arise because there are instances where the price of that a consumer may pay for a good or services is not completely reflected in the amount received by the producer, and the tax and subsidy adjustments mentioned above may not equivalently adjust for the variation in payment and recipient. When using the product approach, a product's value can be added several times. This is known as multiple counting. To avoid the multiple counting error, two approaches are used. Number one, final value method. Number two, value added method. Calculating GDP using the final value method or the value added method should give the same results. A drawback of the final value method is sometimes there is a difficulty in identifying whether a good is an intermediate good or a final good. Example: although sugar is considered a final good, it can be an intermediate good for a confectionery product. The most suitable approach is using the approach method would be the value added approach. How do we get the value added? Value added is the difference between the final value of the product and the cost value of intermediate inputs. Final value of the output is known as gross value of output, GVO. Thank you so much for listening.